Hey, I'm Scott, and today we're taking a look at this carbon fiber slider from Ashanks. So getting right into it, this slider has quite a lot to offer for quite a decent price. So my question was, is this a really good value, or are they actually trying to offer too much? Depending on your expectations and how you plan to use this, I found that the answer could be yes or no, but let's take a look at it from the ground up. As a basic slider, it has all the little details that you would expect, and they're all quite nice. It's lightweight, it's as strong, smooth, and steady as anything you'd expect from this size and design. It has a cheese plate underneath in the center with plenty of screw threads for mounting it onto a tripod or a light stand, and there are also screw threads in either end if you want to mount it that way for extra stability. It has folding, collapsing legs on both sides as well if you want to put this right onto the ground or a flat surface, and those legs do also screw out and extend, so that way you can get balance on more uneven ground. And it also comes in a pretty nice case with custom cut foam for easy transportation. The slider does also give you a removable motor for automated movement that can be programmed and looped infinitely and set for motion time lapses. We'll get more into that in just a minute. It can also give you a panning movement as you slide across with an adjustable panning bar in the center of the two tracks. This is definitely a cool feature that will let you get some unique and good looking footage, either keeping your subject centered as you slide back and forth, or getting a wide pan as you slide back and forth, or even something more unique. But it's also where one of my main complaints comes in. Since that pan bar is always there, even when you're not using it and you just want to slide straight across, the wheels that run along that pan bar can't be all that tight, because when you're not using it, if it's not perfectly aligned, that could possibly cause some issues. What that means is that you do have a very small amount of play in that spinning center section. You can also tighten it when you're not using it, and you definitely should. But of course, any tiny amount of wiggle room can be seen in your video, depending on some other factors, of course, like how careful you are, how fast you're moving, and even what focal length you're using. I found that if you're moving this by hand, you have to be very, very careful, especially at your starting and ending points. It's definitely best practice to start your movement just a little bit before the point where you plan to start using the clip, and then continue your movement just a little bit after, so you can cut off those imperfect ends in post. All that being said, of course, you don't have to use it, and you can lock that center section down for a really solid base when you're not using it, and when you do so, it has no problem whatsoever. Plus, it is a fun trick to have when you need it, as long as you're careful. The other big thing here, of course, is the motorized movement, but there are a few notes that I do want to make about it. First of all, the motor itself is easily removable and easily attachable, which is really, really nice. You have a little thumb screw on that base, and that's really all there is to it. The rubber track will loop through the wheels in the motor and then go into clamps on either end of the slider to hold it in place. You do need tools to tighten down or loosen those clamps for the track though, which kind of makes the toolless design of the motor a little bit meaningless. In a pinch, you can't always just remove the motor and leave the track on there and it doesn't get in the way, but you can't really remove the motor from the track without loosening the track because it's really tightly wrapped around those wheels, so it's not ideal. You'll have the motor kind of hanging there on the track, and that can't be good in the long run. Anyway, it comes with a little control box, which is very simple. It's built well in some ways, but feels cheap in others, like the joystick itself, for example. To power this on, you can use a portable power bank or any kind of USB power, and the cable itself is included. You'll connect the control box to the motor itself with an Ethernet style cable, which is also included. And finally, there are a number of different variations of remote trigger cables included, so you can trigger your camera for time lapse when you're using this for a motion time lapse. It gets to be a real mess of cables, to be honest with you, and if you're okay with that, then that's fine, it works fine, but I myself would prefer something a little bit more tidy. You only get one joystick that can also be pushed to navigate through the menus and use the control box, so it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty easy. Once you plug in the power cable, you'll have options for video shot, time-lapse, and setting your A and B points. These A and B points will apply for whatever other settings you use, so make sure that you set this first. Video movement is pretty simple. In the submenu, you can choose continue moving, which will just continue moving at whatever speed you set, and you can start or pause that movement. You can choose manual control, where you can actually physically, control it just like a joystick on a remote control car. And you can turn the auto round trip on or off for it to continue moving once it reaches the endpoints and come back the other way, or for it to stop at that endpoint. Time-lapse also has a few options in the sub-menu, and shutter sync is what I've been using, and that gives you the options to set your interval starting at 1 second. You can choose the number of photos you want to take, and you can choose the direction of the movement starting from A to B or B to A. At the bottom of that, depending on the settings that you have set, it will tell you the total duration of the resulting video. To jump back in the menu, you're going to hold down the joystick for a couple of seconds, and again, it's pretty simple once you get the hang of it, but I would have preferred just a couple extra buttons to make the whole process a little bit more straightforward. So this is just a quick kind of interview type setup just to test how much the audio from the motor is going to get picked up from the microphone, which is right here in front of me. The motor of the slider is about probably 5 feet away or so, and honestly the raid drive behind me is noisier than that motor, so I don't think it should be any problem in this type of setup. Also, right now I have it on the loop, and I do have the twisting base loosened, so that way it will pan a little bit as it slides back and forth, so you can see at those endpoints especially how smooth that transition is, and if it's something that would be usable or something you have to cut around. So hopefully this can kind of show you a few points about how it works in this type of setup. As far as the strength of the motor goes, it's also not that bad for its size. On flat ground, you shouldn't have any problems with most setups, but on something like a 45-degree angle, it can probably handle maybe a smaller DSLR or a mirrorless setup, but anything more than that, and you might be pushing it a little bit too hard. Overall, obviously, this does have some limitations, like the slight wobbly movement to the base when you actually loosen it or use that pan bar, and the maybe imperfect, slightly overly simple control box for the motor, but there is also a lot in here if you look at it that way. If you look at it from a positive point of view, you can do pretty much anything with this slider. For the price, you're getting a pretty versatile slider here, and again, you don't have to use all the extra bells and whistles that you can possibly take advantage of if you want to. But basically, where they cut corners seems like overall logical places to cut corners for me, things that don't necessarily impact the performance of it all that much. And the parts that really matter do seem to be nice quality, and like I said, the slider itself is really, really nice. If you want to see more details or pricing or possible packages that it could come with, check the video description for links to that. And if you have any other questions or comments, let me know down there as well, and I will do my best to get back to you. For now, if you liked this video or found it helpful, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to see more in the future, and as always, thank you for watching.